Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening and welcome to our election 2024 special live on Teachers Talk Radio. I'm your host, Chris Wilkinson, and tonight we're diving into the education pledges made by the main parties in the 2024 general election and their potential impact on further education. Now, I'm thrilled to be joined by a very special guest tonight, Mr. Mark Gomersall. And Mark is an esteemed education blogger whose insightful analysis and commentary is making a significant impact in this field. And his deep understanding and dedication to education make him the perfect guest for tonight's show. So, Mark, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having us. That was far too kind, to be honest. Far too kind.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, it's absolutely great to have you here. And I thought before we dove into our topics, I just thought it'd be a good idea if you could perhaps tell us your background and what inspired you to start blogging about education.
Trained in secondary, but have pretty much spent predominantly all of my career in further education. And I know as someone who's been involved in further education yourself, a lot of the time in the online space, we kind of feel like we're a bit left out. After about 10 years of maths teaching, I decided, let's just be another mediocre white man yelling out into the void. So that is essentially my journey to that. A lot of interest in policy, a lot of interest in teaching and learning, a bit of a sort of FE focus, but a little bit of everything really.
Yeah. And you know, likewise, I mean, we're a kindred spirit, you and I think we both agree that further education is often referred to as the forgotten middle child, and we certainly feel that way at times. And we have to use our platforms really to push forward further education. And you know, I think it's right that we do something like this tonight because, you know, when we look at education, I mean, we both had a good look at this, haven't we, in the last couple of days? And I think what we found is that there's a lot of information on primary, a lot of information on secondary, but we really had to dig into the further education stuff. But, you know, I'm pleased to say that we found something, and I'm pleased to say that we've got a show to put to people tonight all about further education. So it's absolutely brilliant we can do this. So, in your perspective tonight is incredibly valuable. So, especially with the upcoming election and all the promises being made. So, let's get started with our first topic, apprenticeships. Now, when it comes to apprenticeships and lifelong learning, how do we think that the pledges from Labour and the Conservatives, and, you know, not just Labour and the Conservatives, we have to consider wider parties as well, but, you know, being realistic, we're talking about policy, we're talking about implementing policy, we are looking at Labour and Conservative, really. And so how do the two compare in your point of view? So in terms of specific commitments, are they making specific commitments towards apprenticeships, have you found?
It's actually quite interesting that the two parties have basically laid out how the other party is terrible for apprenticeships. So Conservatives have had on this platform for the last best part of 10, 14 years, and basically saying that Labour obviously prioritised higher education and the traditional routes of apprenticeships sort of faded away. And they introduced the levy in 2017 and have basically revitalised apprenticeships with lots of higher apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships and things like that. So they say Labour lacked the ambition in that area. Labour are saying, yes, Conservatives have done all this, but what they're actually doing are leaving behind young people, and these apprenticeships that are being formed and are being available aren't necessarily inclusive for young people. So both are running on the idea of, we will be great for apprenticeships, the other people won't be. The evidence have put a specific figure, and they want to do 100, or they want to form or create 100,000 new apprenticeships a year for the 5 years of office. Labour have been a little less specific, which is a key theme that basically runs throughout the manifesto.
Yeah.
Lots of ideas and ethos, but not necessarily specifics that will go with that.
It's almost worth saying that as a disclaimer, isn't it? That this is generally the theme for Labour, isn't it? I mean, we're not here to pick holes or pick faults at either major party, but what we have found is that there's less on Labour, isn't there, in that sense?
Yes. I would say they've got a very clear ethos, but how they are going to approach that ethos is a little less clear.
Yeah.
Conservatives caveat with the link to HE courses, and actually it's one of the only few places where higher education and universities are mentioned at all in the Conservative manifesto, and it's the idea that they will try and reroute funding. I don't know why I said reroute funding from those courses that they deem as low value, and that's a whole bag of worms that has been all over the internet, all over the mainstream media of how do you define a low value higher education course. So I'm not going to touch that today. But
no, that's its own thing, isn't it? Really,
its own thing. That's an hour in itself.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So Conservatives have looked that we will reroute funding from there and use this to fund these apprenticeships instead.
Yeah, and I mean, we can't. The elephant in the room when it comes to when it comes to the Conservatives and apprenticeships and to do with further education, we can't not mention the National Service Pledge, can we? I mean, I know it's not the same thing, but it kind of is, isn't it? I mean, they've set their stall out with this National Service Pledge, haven't they? And there is a link there to apprenticeships, isn't there, you would say?
Well, I think it goes back to when you look at, yes, there are these great apprenticeship opportunities, but are they actually going to young people? And there's been all these apprenticeship values of the idea that it's on-the-job skills, developing life skills, developing work skills, but then you're launching or trying to launch a huge national service-based scheme, which logistically I have no idea how that would even begin to be done, which is something that isn't really discussed when it comes to all of that. But surely that's what things like apprenticeships are for. Surely that's what things like the reformed T-levels were for. When you've got students doing 750 hours on a childcare placement or 45 days in a healthcare setting or a lab or local authority, you can't say that young people aren't actually giving to the community when they're doing all of that unpaid. Yeah. And I think in some ways it's evidence that maybe they aren't reaching the right young people with these apprenticeships if this is the extreme measures that they feel like they need to take for them to get this valuable experience.
And of course we teach A-levels, don't we? So we've had this week and last week we've had our learners in, haven't we? I mean, this week we've had our new learners coming in who have just finished GCSEs. Last week we had our first years who were transitioning into second year, and we've had that conversation with them about what is an appropriate apprenticeship, haven't we? And do you think that the Conservatives or indeed Labour have made any more suggestions that the degree apprenticeships are going to become more of a thing in the next term?
Well, I would say this has been one of the big driving forces behind apprenticeships. And obviously, I think it's what Conservatives are very much implying with this as an alternative route to HE. There's a few things where it comes to apprenticeship that I think some people aren't necessarily 100% clear with, and even people that work within the sector I think would surprise people quite a bit when it comes to apprenticeships, and obviously these growth degree level, higher level apprenticeships as well. So there's a lot of information about HE and how funding for HE comes and how much of that comes from sort of central government and student finance and things like that. I think it would shock a lot of people how much of apprenticeship funding is actually from central government. So I was at a local university yesterday. They were talking through some of their degree apprenticeship programs. And one thing that they were basically talking about was a youth worker apprenticeship. And £20,000 apprenticeship, 19,000 funded from central government.
Wow, that's a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
And what they spoke about, and it's something that the Sutton Trust have talked quite a bit about in the last week or so as well, putting out a report, that the vast majority of the students that they work with are adult students at this university who were pre-employed by their apprenticeship. Pre-employed before the apprenticeship. Apologies. And,
it makes sense, yeah.
And there was a figure from the Sutton Trust that I think it's like 68% of people who go on to do these apprenticeships are pre-employed. So you start to look at, are these, when you're saying, we're going to cut low-level HE courses, that disproportionately affect those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds?
Yeah.
Are the apprenticeships that we are going to provide, are these actually for the people who will then not be able to experience HE? And that is my main concern about the policies as they look. And neither Labour nor Conservative have really dedicated making these apprenticeships towards young people. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have apprenticeships to upskill or reskill. It's one of the key driving forces of the apprenticeship levy. But I just feel it's a little bit disingenuous to be selling these as key options for young people. Realistically, that is not who they are going for or going to.
So, I mean, needless to say, there's a lot of work to be done from both parts. But it's interesting. I actually, today, so for the first time, I saw a solicitor apprenticeship, solicitor degree apprenticeship at Teesside University. And it just makes me think that towards the back end of this government, obviously it's in its dying days now, we're starting to see this now. And I looked at it and thought, okay, so we actually have got some apprenticeships up and running, but I think we've only had one degree apprenticeship at our college, haven't we? I think, is that right? We might have had more than one.
There's been a few more, but yeah, it's not. I think statistically, if you're breaking more than one a year, it's an unbelievable situation to be in.
Yeah. So I think to sort of round this little bit off here, are we really saying that there's stuff in about the apprenticeships, but really we're still none the wiser, really, are we? Was that fair to say?
I would say, yeah. I think there needs to be more done to tailor these towards young people, to give these opportunities towards young people. I think back to it's public money, and I think more needs to be done to scrutinise the success rate on these as well. So HE success rate is about 94%. Right. So dropout rate for HE 6%, whereas dropout rate for apprenticeships is roughly about 40%. So non-completion. So when you look at those two things, yes, the money is less. But I think it's this perception that people have that we don't necessarily, as taxpayers, fund anything to do with apprenticeships. So instead of just going, we are going to create more, we are going to create more, we are going to create more, do we need to be looking at what do we do to make sure that those who are on these succeed? Yeah. Instead.
Well, a lot to think of there, isn't there? And a lot for the incoming government to think of as well. Definitely. Absolutely. Well, thanks for that, Mark. So it's clear that both parties have some vision for the future of apprenticeships and lifelong learning, but it's clear that, the theme of this, again, when we look at further education, is that perhaps maybe it's an afterthought for now and it needs to be worked on. So we'll take a short break now, but stay tuned as we dive into the next big topic, funding for further education, and how each party plans to support it. Don't go away. We'll be right back after these important messages.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques. either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy4U, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy4U, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easy4u.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi, teachers. We're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Well, welcome back, everyone, and I hope you got a lot from them messages. We're right in the middle of our deep dive into the 2024 general election's impact, specifically on further education. So, Mark, before the break, we were discussing apprenticeships and lifelong learning, and now let's turn our attention to another critical topic, funding. So, before I ask you a little bit about, or before we delve into the different pledges from the different parties, again, it might be that we have to just declare that we know a little bit more about one part than another, and that's not us being, political or anything like that. We just have to read into what we've got in front of us. Before we do that, what's your, just for the benefit of people listening, what's your understanding of funding in further education?
So back to almost FE being a bit of the forgotten child in a lot of the sort of education sector. Since 2010, real terms wages for lecturers, teachers in FE are about 9% down from where they were in 2010. In that time, wages between college and further education and sixth form staff are about £9,000 less than the average secondary and primary school teacher.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think back to when I first moved into the sector, that wasn't the case at all. So when I first moved into the sector, it was very, very comparable. And over time, that has drifted further and further away. And then obviously it's not that teachers' salaries have ballooned in any way, shape or form in that time. And realistically, one of the biggest issues that the sector has is retention of staff. So I appreciate in FE, you do get a lot of...
Sorry, my apologies.
Sorry. I would say there's easier ways to shut us up.
No, my fault. Apologies.
As a sector, we've got a real retention issue that goes with this. because obviously you've got people who come in from industry, and if pay is stagnant, we are shortage supply of engineers, of plumbers, of electricians, of the health and social care sector. There are huge amounts of opportunities that people can go into, which will give them arguably probably an easier life. And, well, not necessarily always, but it will give them kind of less day-to-day kind of pressures and a better wage to go with it. But you've got this retention where in 10 years, so AOC say that 75% of the sector will leave within 10 years. And even if you factor in people who teach out from a profession, so basically sort of take early retirement and maybe lecture and teach for the remainder of their career, that's still an unsustainable amount of people to continue to lose. You're losing expertise. You're losing kind of quality.
And that is the word, isn't it? Unsustainable. That is the word.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely the right word to use for this. And, you know, we didn't plan for you to say that word, did we? But it's right. That's what I had written down as well. I think that's exactly where we are as well. I mean, how do the funding pledges differ from each party then? I mean, I looked into it as well, and there is different priorities, isn't there, when it comes to further education from both parties?
Yes. I would actually like to touch on the Lib Dems a bit here.
Yes, of course. Please do. Yeah, of course.
The Liberal Democrats have actually been probably the most upfront with what they would want to do for further education. So they have talked about extending the pupil premium for the most disadvantaged students to up to 18-year-olds, where it's currently just for those within kind of primary and secondary schooling. They have promised per pupil funding to rise above inflation as well. And they have also promised to review. Now, that's a really big caveat and a massive asterisk. I promise to review is a very non-committal phrase, but I like the fact they've brought this up. So obviously VAT and education has been in the news a lot with a very specific type of VAT in private schools and things like that. But one thing that's often forgotten about in all of this is that the further education and colleges and sixth form sector is not actually VAT exempt. And it is, as of last year, completely under the public sector. Again, public sector entities all get rolled into governmental accounts, but they aren't able to claim VAT exemption. And simply being able to do that would bring about £200 million back into the sector. And that could pretty much just overnight fund a 5-6% pay rise. So when we're talking about kind of pay, we're talking about retention, and we're talking about kind of things that would make a huge difference. And the Lib Dems are the only party who have directly referenced that. And as I said, big asterisk that they have said they will promise to review this. But the fact that they have mentioned it is a huge thing for the sector.
Yeah, and it's probably, as you say, you're absolutely right to bring in the Lib Dems here because they are flying the FE flag when it comes to funding, and we absolutely must pay credence to them, especially if we are, you know, on the side of further education and what it is that they want to do. That's a massive number, isn't it, to overnight accrue? That is a huge number.
Yes, yeah. So, because it's basically everything, resources and everything that you would normally get VAT exemptions from within schools, we don't get.
Yeah. No, we don't. Well, quite. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. It really is. But I mean, the looking at the manifestos respectively, the Conservative Party are quite quiet on FE, aren't they?
Yes. So they have promised to maintain per pupil funding.
Yeah.
At inflation, But there is, again, another little asterisk to that, in that pupil numbers are going to fall over the years, although it will hit FE last of this. So the numbers are starting to fall within primary at the minute, and it's going to make its way through the schooling system. So whilst per pupil numbers will stay, actual money going into the education sector will fall over time. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff about apprenticeships in there, and there's the ABS, which I assume we might touch upon a little bit later on.
Yes, I think
which was kind of the big thing that they were talking about. But actual kind of here and now, absolute specifics for the 16 to 18 core kind of FE students without sort of adult skills budgets and things like that. No, not a huge amount there.
No.
Beyond the apprenticeships.
I mean, you know, to address the elephant in the room, I mean, we're live on the 27th of June, by the way, so we don't know the election results. So if you are listening to this later and you know the result, then perhaps maybe we've got egg on our face when we say this. But to address the elephant in the room, we're kind of a little bit more interested in what Labour have to say, don't we, if the polls are suggesting what they are. So, I mean, what's your understanding of technical excellence? Because they've said that, haven't they? They've said that they want for them it's technical excellence, isn't it?
So there's a whole thing about having FE colleges bid to become technical excellence colleges, and I wish I could tell you more, and I know there's probably someone more important than me somewhere who can tell you more, but as a lowly maths teacher, I don't have any more information than that. Now, a lot of what Labour are saying is about kind of, it's not necessarily shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's maybe more repainting the deck chairs on the Titanic. And what a lot of what they're doing is kind of repackaging and rebranding things that are already there. So they've talked a little bit about Skills England. So Skills England is going to be where they're going to consolidate a lot of things together that is already kind of in place, but try and make it one system. There is going to be changes that they want to do with the apprenticeship levy to go back to the apprenticeship, just to make the ability for businesses and providers and things to be a bit more flexible with how that funding is used. To meet skills needs of obviously companies, but also local areas. They are, well, actually thinking of this technical excellence through that framework. I know a lot of the Institute of Technologies. Now, I know not all Institute of Technologies are further education establishments, but a lot of the kind of contracts for those are due to come up. So a little part of me, maybe is a cynical part of me, thinks it could just be an element of a rebrand of the Institute of Technologies that are currently in place. Maybe it's a diversification beyond just kind of technology to this idea of technical excellence. So maybe it's diversifying that a little bit more funding to other areas potentially.
Now, as a politics teacher, I will tell you this, okay, that if it's in the manifesto, they will put it in through Parliament. They will make every effort to put it through a green paper, through a white paper. So this technical excellence will probably need to, it'll need to develop in their first term. So we're not going to see anything, in the near distant future, but it will end up on the statute book. So that's a good thing, at least. So we know that it will appear on the statute books, and given the polling rates, it suggests that perhaps maybe there's not going to be a lot of opposition to that in the future. I don't know, but I think to sum it up, I think Lib Dems are probably flying the flag more for it, but Conservative Labour, in terms of funding, we know a little bit about them, but really they're keeping their cards quite firmly close to the chest at this point, it's fair to say. So thank you for that. Thank you for the, I would call it a comprehensive comparison, but I think it's more of a comprehensive comparison between Lib Dems and the rest at this point, isn't it? Rather than the two major parties. But but certainly it's food for thought. Now, it's time for a quick news update, but after the news, we'll continue our discussion, and we're going to look at reforms to post-16 programmes, and we have touched on it, and you sort of mentioned the ABS, but we might dip into a bit more of that in a little while, and maybe a little bit on the baccalaureate and anything where we compare that to traditional institutions. So stay tuned, and we'll be back shortly.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy4U, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy4U, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easy4u.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Teachers and GPs are staggering under extra demands caused by poverty, according to a report in The Guardian. Desperate families, unable to afford food, clothing or heating, are increasingly turning to education and health services for help. New research has shown what, for many, has long been understood through anecdotal evidence, namely that teachers and GPs are acting as welfare advisors, housing officers and social workers alongside the day job. The study by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation also found that some teachers and GPs were providing toys and books, as well as basic essentials such as food and clothing for children. Poverty campaigners have warned that the situation is now urgent. The study found that a third of schools and almost half of GP surgeries had set up a food bank. 44% of pupils were estimated to have come to school hungry, and health and education staff were dipping into their own pockets to help the others. Education staff said resources were being devoted to firefighting poverty and issues linked to it, but that meant less time and energy being spent on teaching. The report features a case study on a school in Manchester, and full details can be found on the Guardian website. The BBC News website has focused again on funding for special educational needs, with councils in England forecasting a massive shortfall in budgets. The BBC has found councils face a deficit of almost £1 billion, with signs that the gap between funding and spending is continuing to increase. Parent groups have focused on the difficulty in obtaining an education, health and care plan. They believe that without one, it's much harder to get specific support. Almost 600,000 children and young people now have an EHCP in England, and last year saw a 26% year-on-year increase. The growing demand is something councils are struggling to meet, and campaign groups expressed concern that some now have very little focus on children's needs because they're worried about the financial bottom line. The NAHT union has called for any new government to write off councils' accumulated deficits in SEND, but none of the mainstream parties address funding of SEND directly in their manifestos. The Conservatives have promised 15 more special schools. Labour promised to increase early interventions and mainstream support. The Lib Dems said they would establish a national body for SEND funding to be managed. And the Greens say they would push for £5 billion of investment for mainstream schools. Full details, along with a series of linked stories, can be found on the BBC website. Schools Week have focused on Labour's manifesto promise to scrap single-word Ofsted judgments and replace the current system with a report card telling parents clearly how schools are performing. There have been very few details, however, of what this could actually look like. The Schools Week report considers a wide range of options for the scorecard, having asked a range of stakeholders for their views on what information it could or should contain. Labour has promised to consult the sector on its plans. It's likely that changes would require a new inspection framework and some changes to current legislation, which would delay plans changes for around a year. Full details of the discussion can be found on the Schools Week website. In Louisiana, USA, every public school classroom has been ordered to display a poster of the Ten Commandments, according to a report on the BBC News website. It is the first measure of its kind in the US and applies to all classrooms in the state up to university level. Opponents to the move say the law breaks America's separation of church and state, protected by the First Amendment to the US Constitution. In 1980, the US Supreme Court struck down a Kentucky law, similar to the Louisiana law, which required the Ten Commandments to be displayed in elementary and high schools. Finally, the BBC also reports on calls by the National Secular Society for a school in Wales to be investigated after it allegedly promoted creationism. The NSS is calling for a ban on teaching creationism as it undermines teaching about evidence-based theories such as evolution. The teaching of creationism as a scientific theory is banned in England, but the promotion of it is not prohibited in Wales. A Welsh Government spokesperson said, "Community schools are not permitted to have a religious leaning, and we are in discussions with the relevant local authority." Full details of this story can be found in the education section of the BBC News website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Well, welcome back, everyone, and I hope you found the news update very informative. I certainly did. And we're continuing our in-depth exploration into the 2024 general election, which is a week away as we are speaking live. Again, if you're listening to this later on, the election may well have happened, but certainly what wouldn't have happened for sure is the policies that we're looking at today, because some of them will be a slow burn. And certainly the impact on further education may well be longer given the discussions that we've been talking about tonight. So before the break, we covered funding. So Mark, let's shift our focus to reforms in post-16 education. Now, particularly in A-levels, because this is what we teach and this is what we are looking at as a is a flagship FE qualification, but of course other programs that might feature as well. So what's your understanding of what the main parties are looking to do in terms of either reforming A-levels or any other programs for that matter?
Well, we're in that position where we're still kind of in the middle of a reform, as obviously got still T-levels cycling out. We've got some subjects that are cycling in. We've got some legacy level 3 subjects that are cycling out, some of which are still waiting for replacement. So generally things around policing, criminology, subject like sport as well. So we're not seeing direct like-for-like replacements for those subjects yet. So it's strange to be talking about future reforms, but in some way, all 3 major parties have put forward a look at some form of reform. So the top of the list is announced at the Conservative Party conference last year was the Advanced British Standard. Lib Dems have kind of went with something similar and are saying they would like to pursue a baccalaureate style qualification. And Labour have again went for vibes and have promised a review.
Yeah. And you know, we looked into this, didn't we? I mean, and we said review. Okay, it's a bit like that word that we saw with Lib Dem earlier. And you're right, it's an asterisk, isn't it? Is that okay? What does review mean? But do you you're probably not going to answer this, and it's unfair to put you on the spot. But do you get the impression that they're going to review and something's going to come of it, or is it review as in we've looked at it, everything's okay, keep calm, carry on? You know,
I don't know.
No one does.
Yes, I think a lot of these reforms, and I know a baccalaureate system will have a little bit more breadth, but a lot of these reforms seem like steps that are taking us back to 2010, 2014.
Yeah.
So talking about narrowness of curriculum. Now, narrowness of curriculum for, let's say, A-level students has pretty much become a necessity because of the linear specifications. So you don't have the modular exams, you don't have the ability to accrue, you don't have the ability to drop a subject partway through and gain credit. So you kind of lose that ability. So those kind of work in the same way when they talk about the minor subjects within the ABS. Those kind of old ASs would do that. Similar thing with BTECs and T-levels. So BTECs, you could have different weightings. So you had your 90 credit diplomas, you had your extended diplomas, you had your sub-diplomas, your extended certificates, for example, which are the one A-level equivalent. And T-levels are obviously a full-time program, full 2 years, no ability to cash out early as well. So if you don't see that course through or you fail an element of that course, you're at risk of getting absolutely nothing at the end of those 2 years. So I feel like a lot of these reforms and these announcements about sort of broadening curriculum, bringing vocational, technical and academic subjects as an opportunity for students to study them alongside each other.
Yes.
Which has traditionally been the case. I mean, you look at school-based sixth forms, you look at college-based sixth forms, the amount that will offer you the ability to study a combination of BTECs and A-levels is huge. But the level 3 reforms have kind of prevented that, or started to move the model away from that. Now, the next wave of the level 3 reforms is starting to try and address that. So we're getting new BTECs, we're getting AQs, alternative academic qualifications, I believe. There's too many acronyms at the minute. So we're getting a selection of those, but even those come with specific caveats. So you can only do one AQ with 2 A-levels, for example. So you can't have that kind of more diverse curriculum, if that's what you were kind of looking for. So I feel a lot of these are almost, because even when you look at ABS, what they were promising, it's maths. I mean, level 3 maths teacher, I will be singing from the rooftops if they say everyone has to do maths. I mean, I love maths. I'm obsessed with maths, and it does me good for work as well if everyone has to do maths.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If 2 of the components for the vast majority of students who already have GCSE maths and English is to study a level 3 English qualification and a level 3 maths qualification, realistically, their curriculum is then not actually going to be massively diverse beyond that.
No.
You're going to basically at most have 3 other subjects that infill in there. And realistically, if you were doing a politics, a history, and let's say psychology, there would be English skills being assessed. I know not in the same way, but you would be developing your English skills within those subjects. Within psychology, you'll be developing your mathematical skills. And yes, obviously it's putting a greater emphasis on those subjects as their own standalone, but it's not actually producing a massive diversity like, say, a 6-7 subject baccalaureate would. So it just feels like returning to 2010.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. And I actually had my last pod I did a couple of weeks ago. I looked at the idea of how A level should perhaps maybe move away from just being purely exam based. And I know some already do that because of coursework, but certainly our subjects are purely exam based. I don't know how you wouldn't examine maths without it being exam based. I don't know, but certainly I plugged my subject and why we could do that as well. And I just wonder if the ABS will, give that opportunity to do that, because I mean, if we're talking about advanced British standards and we're talking about apprenticeships and we're talking about things like national service and we're talking about all these things they almost should be the perfect storm in education, shouldn't they? But it just doesn't seem to. It seems that it's not going to go that way. I don't know. Who knows? But I mean, what I would say though, when we look at these subjects and we look at how, so look at these levels and we look at how it's going, I worry for T-level staff, if I'm honest, because I think every single party is probably going to be looking to review that. And I mean, this is your. I don't know if I want your opinion, because I don't know if you're prepared to give it on air or not. But your view of T-levels. Do you think this is an opportunity to start again with T-levels?
I think the problem at the minute with T-levels is all the students who do other level 3 qualifications, whether they are BTECs, whether they are NCFEs, whether they are city and guilds based qualifications that aren't T-level qualifications, I don't think you are ever going to be able to replicate and provide a T-level that would support all of those students.
Yeah. I
feel, and I'm going to detour slightly, and I'm really sorry, but you know me enough by now. You know this happens a lot.
No, your points are bound to be valid, I'm certain. So please feel free.
I think so. Pre-16, we have a very knowledge-rich curriculum, and post-16, there has been an emphasis on a skills-based curriculum, and it's all about skills, and even it's filtering into A-levels as well, and it's there about this developing of skills and skills and skills and skills, always skills. And T-levels are kind of supposed to be the gold standard of that, but they aren't assessed as skills-based qualifications. They are heavily assessed by traditional examinations. So if you're trying to launch a vocational technical program, the fact that so much emphasis is put on traditional examination just skews things ever so slightly. And now we're in that limbo of, because it's already been touched upon by at least one of the major parties, that they are wanting to reform this reform. And as much as they say it's not a scrapping of T-levels, the Advanced British Standard mini baccalaureate style system does not work with T-levels. A T-level, if you are doing a T-level in construction and built environment, for example, that is what you are studying.
Yeah.
There is not an opportunity to do a little bit of sociology or a little bit of it. It would have to completely reconstruct that qualification. I don't know how a traditional school qualification and the work placement components of that T-level would work together, for example. So there is no incentive for the providers of those T-levels to provide the best resources to the schools, the colleges, the sixth forms that are running them. And I think that's the biggest problem with them. I think if done correctly, they could be absolutely outstanding qualifications. Obviously, there's teething issues. It's a brand new approach.
Yeah.
But now, because there's already this, we are looking at other things. Where's the incentive for people to put their time and their resources into improving these and making these better and better and better in the future? Yeah.
And it's a really good point, and perhaps maybe that'll be addressed in the forthcoming Parliament. But it's certainly food for thought in the run up to the election. So thanks for that, Mark. We're going to hit our last advert, and then we're going to get your final thoughts for the show. Thank you.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Now, as we're approaching the end of the show, I really hope you've had the opportunity to understand how further education is going to look from the eyes of our different parties involved. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion tonight with Mark, and I certainly have. And I'm just commenting to Mark that I really think that this has been a really informative show. Anybody who's in the further education sector will certainly be plugging this to them to get them to sit and listen as to how this can certainly, how it's going to look for them, because they've got a vested interest, of course, like ourselves. And we have covered a lot tonight, Mark, from funding to apprenticeships and reforms in post-16 education. And so before we wrap up, I'm just wondering, what are your final thoughts on the education pledges from each party? And how do you think each party will approach further education?
I think going with the Conservative, so incumbent government at the minute, I suspect it'll be a lot of similar approaches as to how it's currently being used. There's a lot of a wedge driving between FE and HE, which kind of back to the whole, we're going to fund apprenticeships, but at the expense of HE courses, for example. There is a lot of things for retraining, so skills boot camps have been a big driver over the last number of years. So I suspect the Conservative will it'll be the status quo. It'll be very similar to how things currently are.
Yeah.
Labour, it's a little bit harder to judge with Labour. And I think they clearly have elements that they like of what's in the system currently. Whilst they're not obviously admitting that, I think there are certain elements there within the system that they want to look to build upon. A little bit more of devolution with regards funding and things like that. But again, I think there'll be a lot of emphasis on skills. I think there'll be a lot of emphasis on kind of developing regions and meeting the needs of the economy. But I think they have put a few things more forward for younger people. So kind of they've guaranteed support for 18 to 21-year-olds to look for training and apprenticeships and things like that. Yeah. But realistically, I think you need someone to really put their flag in the sand and saying, we are doing something, we are legislating something, that these apprenticeships or this levy funding must go towards 18 to 24-year-olds or 16 to 24-year-olds. Because at the minute, they're all just, I don't think they're going far enough with that.
No.
So I think those I think, I would say Labour's difficult because there's not a huge amount of depth there, but their ethos is clear. It's about pushing standards. It's about raising aspirations. It's about tackling inequality. And further education can be great with that, of retraining, upskilling, things like that.
And they do have the opportunity to put that blank canvas, as it were, to Parliament and see what comes of it. So it's really, it's a bit of a shrewd move from Labour, to be fair, to keep it relatively blank, because whatever they put forward, they'll probably be honouring their manifesto pledge. So it makes sense in that sense. And we have seen previous, parties do a similar thing. Obviously, the Blair years of 97, he was very clear on education, so he had a different viewpoint. But we have seen, previous governments who have not really put their flag in the sand, as you say, but they have been able to transform further education. So it might be a good idea, Mark, if you're happy to invite you on the show, maybe midway through the term, and just see how things are going in terms of FE, and maybe we can recap on what we predicted and what we thought, although we didn't really predict what we thought was happening compared to what's actually gone on. So it would be an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show, mate. And I really, really have enjoyed tonight. And I think you've been a really top guest. And I can't thank you enough, to be honest.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
And that's all for us tonight. Until next time, I will be on in 2 weeks' time again for the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson. Until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time. on Teachers Talk Radio.